The day the town decided her fate, the dust hung so thick in the air it felt like the sky itself was holding its breath, and Clara May Whitlow felt smaller than the shadow at her feet as she knelt on the edge of the boardwalk with rope biting into her wrists and shame burning hotter than the sun on her bruised skin, the murmurs of Dry Creek folding over her like a slow, cruel tide. Because in places like this, a woman did not need a crime to be condemned, only a story whispered often enough. And hers had grown teeth and claws long before she ever understood what it meant to be hunted. And when she lifted her eyes, she saw men who had once tipped their hats now staring through her as if she were already gone, while the memory of her mother's last breath drifted through her mind like a ghost that refused to leave, reminding her that survival was not the same thing as living, and that sometimes fate arrived wearing the face of strangers who believed they were righteous. She did not cry when the marshal read her charge, did not beg when the rope was tightened for show, because Clara May had learned early that tears only fed men who wanted to feel powerful, and she kept her voice low when she finally spoke. Barely more than a breath carried on the wind, whispering to the man who had stepped out from the crowd with the calm stride of someone unafraid to be judged that he would regret choosing her, that whatever darkness had clung to her all these years would surely rot him from the inside out. And she meant it not as a threat, but as a warning forged from every night she had slept hungry, and every morning she had woken still alive. Elijah Boone listened without flinching, his eyes steady beneath the brim of his hat, the kind of eyes that had seen drought turn land to bone, and still believed rain would come again. And when he smiled, it was not the careless smile of a gambler or the cruel curl of a man buying flesh, but something quieter and heavier, a smile that carried the weight of long decisions made alone under open skies, and he answered her in a voice meant only for her, telling her that the only regret he carried was waiting so long to speak up, waiting so long to stop letting other men decide what was worth saving. The townsfolk shifted when he laid the coins down, more money than Clara May had ever seen in one place, the sound of it striking wood like the toll of a bell. And though the marshal pretended it was lawful and the men pretended it was mercy, Clara May knew the truth of it as the rope was cut and the hands that lifted her were rough but not unkind, that she had simply been traded from one fate to another, and fate had teeth no matter whose hand held the leash. As Elijah guided her to his horse, she noticed the way his fingers trembled just slightly at her elbow, not with fear but with something deeper, a hesitation born of knowing that once a line was crossed, it could never be uncrossed. And she wondered what kind of man chose trouble when he could have chosen peace. What wound had shaped him into someone who saw value where others saw waste. The ride out of Dry Creek stretched long and quiet, the town shrinking behind them like a bad dream that refused to fully fade. And Clara May watched the horizon with the alert stillness of a cornered animal, every creak of leather and jingle of tack a reminder that she was no longer bound by rope but by debt, a debt heavier than iron. And she told herself she would repay it with obedience if she had to, with silence if that was safer, because hope had a habit of getting people killed. Elijah said little, but his presence filled the space between them, and when they stopped at a stream to water the horses, he finally spoke of the ranch, of land that had survived fire and flood, of a house built by hands now buried beneath it. And as he spoke, Clara May saw the loneliness in him, the kind that did not beg for company but endured it like a drought endures the sun. And for reasons she did not understand, her chest ached with the knowledge that two broken things do not always make something whole. Sometimes they only cut each other deeper. Night fell hard and fast, the sky cracking open with stars sharp enough to wound. And when they reached the edge of his land, Clara May felt a pull she could not name, a sense that the ground itself was watching, measuring her worth as surely as the men in town had. And she whispered again, softer this time, telling him he did not know what he had taken on, that the past had a way of clawing its way back no matter how far you rode. And Elijah answered not with words but with a look that said he knew exactly what he was risking, that some choices were made not because they were safe but because they were right. Inside the house, the air smelled of old wood and solitude, and as he cut the last of the rope from her wrists, their fingers brushed, a spark of something dangerous passing between them, and Clara May pulled back, fear flaring bright and sudden because closeness had always come at a cost, because kindness had always asked for more than she could give. And Elijah stepped away at once, respect settling between them like a fragile truce, telling her she was free to leave at dawn if she wished, that His offer had never been a cage, and the words unsettled her more than chains ever could. Alone in the small room, he offered. Clara May lay awake listening to the wind press against the walls, her mind racing with the echo of Dry Creek and the weight of Elijah's choice. And as sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed not of escape, but of standing at the edge of a field just before a storm breaks, the air electric with promise and ruin. And somewhere beyond the dark, a shape moved toward the house, slow and deliberate, carrying with it the unspoken truth that the past had already found her trail, and that the man who had smiled at her warning might soon learn just how sharp regret could be. By the time dawn crept over Elijah Boone's ranch, it arrived carrying the sound of hoofbeats that did not belong, and Clara May woke with her heart already racing, as if her body had known before her mind did, that the past had finally closed the distance, the kind of knowing earned only by those who have spent their lives running. And when she stepped outside the small room, she found Elijah standing in the yard with his coat already on and his rifle resting easy in his hands. Not surprised, not angry, only resigned in the way of a man who understands that some debts are paid in blood no matter how carefully you live. And in that quiet moment she realized he had never truly believed she would bring peace into his life, only truth. The riders came out of the morning haze like ghosts made solid. 4 men bearing the same hard eyes she remembered from other towns, men who smelled profit in human suffering and called it justice, led by Silas Crow, whose voice had once promised her protection and whose hands had taught her what betrayal felt like. And when he smiled at her now, it was with the satisfaction of a hunter reclaiming wounded prey, telling Elijah that some property had wandered too far from its rightful owner, and that Clara May felt the old shame try to wrap itself around her throat until she could no longer breathe. Elijah stepped forward then, calm as a deep river, telling Crow that whatever business he thought he had ended at the edge of this land, that no man owned another soul no matter how many lies he sold himself to sleep at night. And when Crow laughed, Clara May understood that words would never be enough, because men like that only listened when the world spoke back through pain. The first shot cracked the morning open, birds scattering as if the sky itself were fleeing, and in the chaos that followed, Clara May found herself moving without thought, years of survival guiding her feet as she dragged Elijah behind cover when his shoulder bloomed red, the smell of gunpowder and dust mixing with the memory of every time she had been too afraid to fight back. And something inside her broke loose, something fierce and long starved. She took Elijah's rifle when he pressed it into her hands, surprise flickering across his face, not because she held it, but because she knew exactly how to use it. And as she fired, she felt no triumph, only a grim clarity, each shot a line drawn between who she had been and who she refused to remain, until the yard fell quiet again, and Silas Crow lay still in the dirt, his eyes staring at a sky that would never answer him. When it was over, Clara May dropped the rifle and sank to her knees, shaking with the weight of what she had done, the final severing of a chain she had carried for too long. And Elijah knelt beside her despite his wound, telling her softly that surviving did not make her cruel, that choosing to stand did not make her damned. And she wept then, not for Crow or Dry Creek or the years stolen from her, but for the strange, terrifying truth that for the first time she was no longer running. Days passed in a haze of healing and quiet work, the ranch settling into a new rhythm shaped by shared glances and unspoken understanding. And Clara May found herself learning the land the way Elijah had, reading the soil and the sky, discovering that there was strength in tending something instead of fleeing it. And though fear still visited her in the night, it no longer ruled her, softened by the knowledge that when morning came, she would not face it alone. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the fields, she stood beside Elijah on the porch where the wind carried the scent of rain, and she finally told him the truth she had tried to warn him with that first day, that choosing her meant choosing a life forever, marked by consequence. And Elijah took her hand without hesitation, his grip steady, telling her that regret was only for men who never dared to live honestly, that waiting had cost him enough years already. In that moment, Clara May understood that destiny was not a single path laid before you, but a series of choices made despite fear, and she chose to stay, not because she owed him, but because for the first time her future felt like something she was allowed to want. As the camera of fate pulls back from that quiet porch and the land stretches wide beneath a settling sky, remember that stories like this are born from courage, sacrifice, and the refusal to let the past decide the end. And if you believe in tales where broken souls find their stand beneath open skies, where the Wild West still speaks of love and redemption, then ride with us again by subscribing to the Western Tales, because every legend needs a witness and every destiny deserves to be told.